Welcome to Adventures in Life. I'm Earl Beecher, your host. We are fortunate to have Dr. Richard Schneider with us again. We asked him to come back, and he was joined also by Dr. Joyce Kovelman. And Dr. Kovelman told me there was something about an airplane crash, Dr. Schneider, that had something to do with your getting started?
It's sort of where it all began.
I'm going to have to hear this one.
Okay. It's sort of where it all began. Many years ago, sometimes more than I would like to remember, I was in rural Alaska. And one of my children often traveled with me. And this particular time, my biological son, Mark, I have 5 children, 3 are adopted, and this was my biological son, Mark, was with me, and we were up to a village called Mountain Village on the Yukon River. We were only going up for the afternoon, but the weather turned bad, and we were there 5 days.
It turns bad often in Alaska.
Often up there, particularly in December.
I guess.
And 5 days later, it was Christmas Eve, and the plane came and got us to take us back to Bethel. But 100 miles out, it iced up, and we had to make a crash landing, and in making the landing, it tore the wing off and bent the prop. 65 below zero, whiteout conditions,
Oh boy.
and not much chance of being found. So I wrote a goodbye note to my wife, and we had put my son Mark, there were 3 adults on the plane, inside 2 sleeping bags, hoping he could survive. And I went over to the plane and handed him this note. And I had, tears in my eyes, and I was saying, Mark, please give this to your mother. And he looked at me with the steeliest eyes, and he said, Daddy, please understand something. I have important things to do with my life. You need to stand beside me. Go use this note to light a fire with it so we can be found. Pretty brassy for a 9-year-old.
Not bad.
To make a long story short, that's exactly what we did. And the second time we lit a fire, a plane was flying overhead, and the pilot said, for 10 seconds, there was a hole in the cloud all the way down to the fire. For just 10 seconds, and it closed up. Well, a rescue plane got us.
Long enough for him to see that you were in need.
Well, and there were many people looking for us. At any rate, a rescue plane came and picked us up, and by this time it was Christmas Eve,
How
8
many
o'clock.
hours had you been?
11. We were down
the
to
longest 11 hours of your life.
of my life. I thought it was the last 11 hours of my life.
Yes.
And the rescue plane came and got us. And by this time, the message had gone back to this village that we were being brought in. And the Christmas Eve services were just over, the candlelight services, so everybody went out to the airport. They said maybe 1,200 people. The rescue plane landed and was slowly taxiing in, and these 1,200 people lit their candles, surrounded the plane, and 1,200 people started singing Silent Night as the doors opened. And Mark stepped out, and he looked around, his 9-year-old, and that was a beginning, because it really was a turning point for me in terms of who am I, what do I have to do in this life. And if I needed a 2x4 to get my attention, that was a 2x4. And I am here where I am today because that was the beginning of our thinking about what we could do as a family. And then my family went on to create a nonprofit corporation 4 years later.
And pretty soon you have
That then became a
extended
university,
family.
that then became the radio station, and all of my children at one time or another have been closely associated. They've all been on the board of directors, and they've been closely associated. My daughter is a general manager in Costa Rica. Right now I have my Eskimo son is in New Zealand,
Yes.
working with the Maoris.
And you are the Chancellor of the University of Global Education, and you are reaching out to people all over the world.
That's what we're trying to do.
That's what you're trying to do. Now, you were kind enough to have Professor Dr. Joyce Kovelman come and join us, and you're a professor with the University of Global Education.
That's correct.
What do you teach?
Well, I have written my first book. We're looking for a publisher, and it may be the university. And I am teaching about 40% of the book, something called The Realms of Spirit. And that's about many of the mystical traditions throughout time.
From all different cultures, or do you
All
focus
different-
in one area? Or?
No, I take 9 pathways and I do them in story form to make it more relevant and more interesting. And what we find is something that's called the perennial or ageless wisdom. And it runs through every one of the traditions. The mysticals
All
are
of the
different,
traditions
but
have common roots?
that's right. It's not just the common root, they have common ideas. And in
Common values.
That's right, and ideas. And they're really neat.
Has our society lost a lot of these common values? Is that why we're having all the problems we're having?
As a psychologist and as a mother, I think I would agree with you. I think there was always substance abuse and there were difficult problems, but not on the large global scale that we have today. There's not enough time for family. There's not enough time for self. We're not valued as people. We're looked at as machines. We're easily replaceable. I think we need to bring back meaning and purpose in our life.
You know, I may be getting off the subject a little bit, but I think the media, Vice President Gore brought up something, it is political, but on media, but at 5:30 on Sunday afternoon at home, I'm surfing channels and I see these two prostitutes dancing, and finally they did such a thing that they had to put censored across the screen, and I said, this is 5:30 prime time Sunday afternoon with children watching. This is not appropriate. I felt it was extremely inappropriate.
Well, Richard and I were talking about something like that on the way over to the studio, and we really feel that they are raised on a diet of sex and violence. They often go together. That's all they see.
Yes, oh, the children's cartoons.
And they come home, and many of them come home to empty houses. There's nobody to ask them how their day is. There's no one to say this is not appropriate for you to watch. And so they're getting a very distorted point of view about what life is about.
Now, how does the University of Global Education help people? I'm not quite sure how to phrase this, because I know a lot of your work is out there in the third world where they're not being exposed to all of this filth. But here at home we are, and are we, the university is not spreading that. Is it helping to counteract it? What role do you see yourselves playing to help solve the problems? Maybe the people out there are better off than we are, is really what I'm trying to get at.
Well, the global school in India is one such thing because it's a demonstration project.
Yes.
That could be replicable and made culture-free almost anywhere in the world. The other thing is much of our programming on Radio for Peace are things that work and a positive spin, not all the trash, but a positive spin on life. We try to have interviews with many leaders of the world, and particularly in the areas of ecology and economics and self-sufficiency, things that work.
Sanitation,
health, population,
diet, nutrition, the whole thing?
Exactly right.
To help people.
A whole range of things to make the world better. And for things that work, and in agriculture and everything else,
Well,
food sufficiency.
That's what I was going to say, that so often we try to impose a certain curriculum on third world nations, and it's not relevant to them. This is a university that's trying to teach them what they need to learn in order to cope and live their lives.
Now, and in the U.S., for example, I remember reading a reception report recently at the radio station from Idaho, and the man said, "You do not know how important it is for you to be on the air, because I am a single father raising a 7-year-old, and together we listen to your programs, and we can do it together, and I don't have to be embarrassed, and keep up that kind of work."
Okay, now with your work with the countries in the third world, do you find the family structure is intact or it's breaking down? It's breaking down here in the United States, and it's a disaster.
It is.
We're beginning to realize having the mother working and out of the home is causing problems.
Well, you can't have even the most sincere parent, male or female,
Yes.
who's going to work 8 to 10 hours a day and travel time. I don't care how much they love their child, there is a limit to what they can do in the remaining hours each day.
Exhausted.
Right.
They're exhausted, that's exactly
Now,
right.
And in the third world, of course, you have an additional problem. And I have often said, you really can't have much life on less than 1,500 calories a day. And when you have more than half the world going to bed hungry, you have created a problem inherent in the very system itself. And you see, that's one of the things we have to get at. How do people, feed themselves?
Oh, yes.
And do that. And there are ways of doing it. teaching them how to garden, for example.
Yes, give a man a fish, you fed him for a day, teach him how to
fish.
fish.
That's what we're trying to do. Or for one of the projects in India, for example, is something so simple as to teach people how to use solar ovens made out of tin foil, so that they can cook and don't have to try to find wood in an area where you can't find wood. But we're talking about rather simple things that make the difference literally between life and death.
Do they have access to tinfoil?
We see that they do. I mean, tinfoil is relatively cheap.
No,
I can take quite a bit of it over in my suitcase
Okay, but
to build a lot of ovens.
I
for
see. It
example.
doesn't take a whole lot then.
Earl,
No, not at all.
they're going to have a fourth summit on women in Beijing. And we've also talked about the fact that many of these women don't see the Western woman or the American woman as really liberated. They just see them as one more pack on the back. And they don't want to really become liberated in the American way. And the other thing that conference
Whoa. One more pack on the back. I need a little help. What do they see the American? I'm curious.
Okay, they see the American woman struggling to be everything, that she's exhausted,
Professional mother,
professional
homemaker.
mother, model,
Right.
has to be a certain size, has to do gourmet cooking, be an entertainer. They're exhausted. Also has to play a good game of tennis or racquetball. And I don't think that the values in some third world nations is that's how I want to be liberated. On the other hand, the third world woman really wants education for herself and her family.
Is home economics a hot topic?
It is a hot topic. Just as Richard said, if you don't have enough to eat,
Oh, absolutely.
it's very hot topic.
Cooking?
Cooking, sewing,
Homemaking.
basic survival skills, even environmental and ecological, is how to heal the earth so that we can live on it. It's very important.
Well, and
So
how-
they're really back to the fundamentals of the family
That's right.
more than the cosmetic and everybody weigh less than 100 pounds.
That's right.
Oh, absolutely.
And some of them don't want to become more industrialized because they don't want to lose those values or their connection with the earth.
Connection with the earth. I want to pick up on that thought when we come back. Meanwhile, we need to pause for a public service announcement and then stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Our guests are Dr. Joyce Kovelman, who is a professor of the University of Global Education, and Dr. Richard Schneider, who is the chancellor of the University of Global Education and one of the co-founders. We were talking about the family and the need in the third world countries. We've been talking about the environmental needs, and in a previous show with Dr. Schneider, we were talking about protecting the rainforests and other things we need to do.
But that's as relevant, Earl, for this part of the world because we're all one planet now.
And we're all
we have
breathing
to-
the same
That's
air.
right, and if we pollute, that's going to go around the globe. And if we have soil erosion or we cannot produce enough food, that's going to affect all of us. This runaway immigration where people can't get fed enough, like in Somalia, Ethiopia, they're just flooding across other people's boundaries, and those nations can't feed them either.
Well, they
We're
have
going
to
to
just
see
survive.
much
Right.
more of that.
Well, and the problems related to pollution, acid rain. These kinds of things do not know any national boundaries.
No.
The acid rain doesn't stop because there's some invisible boundary between countries.
I've been very impressed. We've been losing business in California. I've done a lot of being a professor of business finance. We lost 265,000 jobs last year in Los Angeles County alone. They're fleeing across the state borders because California's pollution laws are so strict. So we move it to Nevada, Arizona, Oregon, Utah, Mexico,
That's right.
and pollute.
Right.
And I think
And I don't
the-
think that solves the problem at all.
I really think that in some ways California should be commended because they take a strict law, and I think the other states that are pulling the business away, there are other factors involved. I think they have to look at what they want. Do they want their rivers polluted? Do they want their soil
No, I
eroded?
don't think they do.
But I don't know if they're going to allow it, and they have more liberal laws, and they're inviting industry
Well, even
there.
even national laws won't stop it because we just moved to Mexico or Canada.
Right.
That's right. So it's
Well,
a
she had
global
great experience
problem.
in Alaska and Canada and the other
Well,
regions.
and you think about the waterways of the world, and many of the waterways of the world are polluted, and most of them are across national boundaries. The major waterways of the world go across national boundaries. Again,
Well, even the
they don't
ocean's
stop,
polluted.
You know,
right.
That's right. Many of the major streams of the world are polluted. And of course, water is one of the most essential basis for human life. You have to have water. And you have to have clean water.
Yes.
And yet, 60% of the world today does not have potable, clean water.
Well, but see, we have to
So they're drinking water that's not suitable
Yes,
for human
that's right.
consumption, is what you're saying.
Correct.
There's a
So there's a
wonderful
challenge there. What you're doing through the global education.
That's right, because we're becoming one world where we each have responsibility not only for our own corner of the world, but all others. There's a proverb that comes from Kenya, and it says, "Treat the world kindly. It was not given to you by your parents. It was lent to you by your children." And I think it's an incredible philosophy.
Say that again. I like that.
Treat the world well. It was not given to you by your parents. It was lent to you by your children. And if you look at that one little twist, it really tells us about all of us have to start taking care of this planet.
Yes.
It's a gift.
And accepting responsibility. Quite literally, there are no faraway places anymore in the world. Think about it.
You can be there in how short a time? Because I know you've been to them all.
I've been to nearly 100 countries, but beyond that, you can be anywhere instantly with radio.
Oh, yes.
And so on. I mean, there literally are no faraway places anymore. There is a kind of interdependency in the world today, not only social but economic, that is incredible, that ties the entire world together. It's not a matter of whether we want to believe this or not. It's an irrefutable fact. It doesn't matter whether people, even think this is so. It's true. And that's what we have to take attention to. What are we going to do about this world in which there are no faraway places? It's quite amazing. I can get on a plane and be almost anywhere in the world in 12 hours.
And I can fax and go to bed and wake up and have an answer to a question I have halfway around the world. So electronically, we're very connected as well.
I'm impressed. Just this last week, I received a letter from Russia, one from Japan, and one from Ireland.
That's
and
right.
I'm sure with your radio station, you're getting this. This is very commonplace for you to receive these kind of inquiries and responses.
That's why I'm so excited about a global education, and that we can make it relevant to people, and we can also learn that we're one family with many cultures, many beliefs, and we can begin to help each other and support each other rather than fight with one another.
Now, you're calling this program Belonging to the Earth? Is that the phrase?
That's the Symposium programming.
That's the Symposium
The
that's coming
Symposium
out.
for the Indigenous people, which is very related to Joyce's work. Because the idea is that we are one planet now. I mean, it always has been one planet, but only now has a recognition of the interdependency of the planet become really critical to our survival.
And the indigenous people have always taken care and lived in harmony with the earth and the seasons. And they really have a lot to teach us about balance, harmony, about living in communities, not just nuclear isolated individuals who are very alienated and very unhappy. They're community minded. So there's a lot the indigenous people can give to us at a time of great need.
How do we get us to listen?
Well, one thing we have to do is change our priorities
That's right.
of life. I mean, this is one of the main things we're doing. Why in the world are we increasing our military budget, for example, when we now have enough nuclear weapons to destroy everybody a few hundred times over? Do we really need more? How many times, when you're dead, you're dead. How many times do we need to kill everybody in the world? And the more frightening things today, terrorism, biological terrorism,
yes.
these kinds of things.
Oh, that's right.
But it goes back to teaching values, to rethinking what is important. And that, of course, goes back to the family.
Now,
Okay, so we're
something you said earlier before we started taping is that you have traveled to many of these countries and you've picked up exotic diseases. As we exchange more and more with other people, we're going to all have to be careful about spreading disease. When Cortez came into Mexico, he about wiped out the population with the diseases that he brought.
Absolutely, but look at the movie Outbreak, and there are a couple of very big bestsellers, Hot Zone and whatnot. Those particular viruses that they're writing about, there was just an outbreak in Africa. They're developing because they used to be confined in rainforests. And
Yes.
now we're cutting down the rainforest, and the natural habitat and the natural ecological balance is disappearing. And we also are one small country where Richard said we're not very far away from each other, and they can go from one airport and spread it to another airport.
Right.
And so we really are one global community that has to learn to deal with that fact. That means business is different, family is different. The
Okay.
whole
I asked the question, how do we get us to listen to these changes? And you responded by saying we have to change our priorities. That's a goal, but it's not an answer to my question. How do we get us to pay attention?
Well, this is why we're in education. We have to educate people. It's very, I mean, the thing is, we can't do it on the way we've done it in the past. We simply have to educate people. In other words, re-educate people. I like to say it's what we have to do is unlearn most of the things we think we know.
Oh
And I
boy,
think we have to really...
Not easy.
not easy.
But,
No.
but you're asking me what has to be done. What has to be done is we have to each of us individually have to be able to do this, and it's going to be accomplished internationally through education.
I'll give you a different answer, but it's the same. I'll just put it in a different context. Instead of being nouns and objects and just ticky-tacky little boxes that people move around on a chessboard, we have to become verbs. We have to get involved with our family. We have to learn something about meaning and value. We have to learn to share. And I think we have to look at the planet and see what we're doing. For a very rational species, we're rather insane. We're killing the planet that's feeding us.
Well, I used to tell my students in school, as we moved west in the settlement of the United States, if we had deliberately set out to waste our natural resources, we couldn't have done a better job.
You're right.
You're right.
You're absolutely
I look
right.
at the forests and I see, you know, the telephone poles, incredible
And this
waste.
is true all over the world, not just in the U.S. I mean,
Okay.
there are I've been in places in India that are totally barren for hundreds of miles that 100 years ago were rainforests. And today you can't even grow a blade of grass on there because it's down to the bedrock. I mean, it isn't just here. This is a global problem. This is an international concern.
It's going to be that way in Brazil, no doubt.
Right.
Right now.
But see, I would say that you have to start with the children. The children are our future. They're going to inherit whatever earth we give them. And I think one way to listen is to talk to parents and get them involved. Start writing books and scripts for children, getting them to interact with the program, giving them seeds to plant. When I was a young kid, we had victory gardens during World War II.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I think we need to bring the children in. I think we need to listen to them. I think we need to begin to empower them, not to have a 14-year-old girl with a baby and a 14-year-old boy with a gun. But I think we have to give them alternatives.
That's what we're
and
getting.
That's right. That's right. And that's globally, not just in America.
And very practical things, recycling, for example. We have to learn to get by with less. We are such a consumption-oriented society. One of the things we like to export, because there's money in it, is all of our, all of our gadgets and all of this consumption orientation. And as you well know, a lot of it's just plain packaging. You take the package off and sometimes you don't have much.
That's true. The packaging is attractive.
And not only that, and for many products, the packaging costs as much as the contents and sometimes more. And yet in this world, we can no longer afford to consume. And yet one of the things we're exporting is the attitude about what you need.
That's
How
right.
much you need.
How much you need.
How much it takes to
Okay.
satisfy you.
But how about deciding we need time with our children? How about deciding that stress is killing us? Men and women now are getting the heart attacks, the high blood pressure,
younger
the stroke.
ages all the time.
That's
All the
right.
time.
Even young people are collapsing. How about beginning to say the family's important, that I don't want to spend as much time on the freeway every morning and every evening? How about talking about smog? And I mean, really, it's getting to a point where you don't have to just listen, you just have to open your eyes and see it. How about media switching from violence and sex and stuff and start showing heroes? Children today don't have models, they don't have a vision for the future that isn't doom and gloom. And what do they really want to move forward? A lot of kids don't
Well,
want to grow up
it's
today.
true. They're telling me our time is up.
Oh, good.
I really appreciate your being here because I think that you are on target with the things that we have to address as a human society. And thank you for being with us, Dr. Joyce Kobelman and Dr. Richard Schneider. And thank you for being with us. And please join us soon again for Adventures in Life.